The passenger. It was supposed to be a simple drive, just long enough for him to get out of the suffocating quiet of his house, the house that now felt more like a tomb. David tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, as the two-lane road stretched endlessly ahead of him. The pain of losing Anna still sat like a weight on his chest, and no amount of deep breath seemed to loosen its grip. He drove without direction, without destination, just away. The road wound through a dense forest, skeletal branches clawing at the dark sky overhead. The pale glow of the moon filtered through the trees, casting long, jagged shadows across the pavement. He didn't notice how empty the road had become. He didn't notice how the forest grew darker, denser, more oppressive. But something else noticed him. David blinked as his eyes caught a shape in the rearview mirror. A shadow, a figure, seated in the back of his car. He twisted around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. The back seat was empty. He faced forward again, his breath coming fast. "Get a grip, man," he muttered to himself. "You're just tired, distracted." But then he felt it. A presence, cold and heavy, pressing down on the air around him. The temperature inside the car seemed to drop several degrees in an instant. A faint sound reached his ears, like a whisper carried on a breath of wind. He couldn't make out the words, but it sounded familiar. Too familiar. Anna's voice. "No," he whispered, gripping the wheel tighter. "This isn't real." The whisper grew louder, clearer, until he could finally hear the words. "Why did you leave me, David?" His blood turned to ice. His heart pounded so loudly in his ears that it nearly drowned out the voice. Nearly. He glanced into the mirror again, and this time, there was no mistaking it. There was a figure in the back seat, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. "Anna?" he croaked, his voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it leaned forward, its hollow eyes locked onto him. The air grew colder still, and David could see his breath in front of him now, fogging up the windshield. His hands trembled violently as he tried to keep the car steady on the twisting road. "You left me," the voice whispered again, but now it was wrong, distorted. The voice was no longer Anna's. It was something else mimicking her, taunting him. David slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the empty road. His breathing was ragged, and his heart felt like it might burst out of his chest. He turned around fully to confront the thing in the back seat, but it was gone. The car was empty again. He sat there shaking, trying to convince himself that it was all in his head, that grief and exhaustion were playing tricks on him. But then his headlights flickered, and he heard it again. Only this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a low growl, deep and guttural, coming from the forest around him. Shadows moved among the trees, circling the car. He could feel their eyes on him, hungry and malevolent. Panic gripped him as he fumbled to shift the car back into drive, but the engine sputtered and stalled. "No, no, no!" he shouted, turning the key again and again. The engine refused to turn over. The growling grew louder, closer, and then something slammed into the side of the car with a force that rocked it onto two wheels before it crashed back down. David yelled out, frantically trying to restart the engine, panic etched on his face. Another slam came from the other side, and the windows began to frost over, obscuring his view of whatever was outside. In the frost on the windshield, a single word appeared, written by an unseen hand. "Stay." David let out a choked growl as the engine roared to life at last. He floored the accelerator, the tires screeching as the car tore down the road. He didn't care where he was going, as long as it was away from whatever had found him in that forest. The growling faded, and the shadows receded, but the cold presence in the car didn't leave. It lingered, clinging to him like a second skin. He could still hear faint whispers in his ears, too quiet to understand but loud enough to keep his heart racing. He would drive until daylight. He would drive so fast and so far that nothing could follow him. The next day, they found his car abandoned by the side of the road. The engine was cold, the doors locked. There was no sign of David, but on the frosted windshield, one word was etched in the glass. "Stay."